meeting of the Policy Management Committee. We'll start off by giving my colleagues an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Pernille.
Pernille Suvarna, student member of the Board of Education. Excited to be here today.
Good afternoon, Shebra Evans, District 4 School Board Member. Good to see everyone.
Good afternoon, Brenda Wolf, District 5.
And I'm Rebecca Smondrowski, Chair of the Committee and representing District 2. Next, I will ask if there are any questions or concerns regarding the informational summary that was provided from the September 17th meeting. Anyone? No? Okay. And then we're going to keep moving. So this afternoon, we're going to review the following items. The annual update on the implementation of policy JHC, child abuse and neglect, the draft policy GCB, investigation of allegations of employee misconduct, draft amendments to policy GAA, positive work environment in a self-renewing organization, technical amendments to policy BLB, rules of procedure and appeals and hearings, and a follow-up discussion on the school year calendars for the 25-26 school year. We're also receiving an item of information on MCPS regulations, which has been approved by the superintendent's office since the committee's last meeting. So we have a very, very full agenda, so we're going to try and just move things along as quickly as we can. And with that, I will turn it over to staff to introduce yourselves and kick us off with the child abuse and neglect update.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Greg Edmondson, the Director of Student Welfare and Compliance and the district-wide child abuse contact for the district within MSDE. As you mentioned, JHC, Child Abuse and Neglect Policy, does establish the board's expectation, if we can go to the first slide, and our desired outcomes as a school district to prevent child abuse and neglect within our schools and within our families. The policy sets up the expectations about being consistent with federal, state, and local law and providing a safe and engaging and supporting environment for all of our students, as well as the reporting structures that we hold ourselves to within MCPS. In the memorandum received from Dr. Taylor, it has annual updates on our staff training. Go to the next slide, please. How we screen employees, the screening of our volunteers and our contractors. We do talk about our partner agencies. I'll go into a few of these highlights within the next few minutes. And then we will share with you our current numbers from the past school year, FY24, which is the 23-24 school year, as well as any considerations that we have moving forward. Specific to staff training, we do, and as you are aware and have completed as a board, thank you, have the compliance training for child abuse and neglect. It's an annual training for all of our employees, temporary part-time substitutes, the 27,000 individuals who do work in some capacity for MCPS. And as of the start of school, we were 100% in compliance with that expectation. These modules are continuously approved upon every year when we go through a process of cross-office and external stakeholders providing input into these trainings, so that we have the most updated information that we are sharing as part of not only the training but the expectations for our employees. All of the mandated reporter expectations that we have. With regards to screening of our employees, on the next slide, we do conduct multi-point background checks, fingerprinting for all prospective employees. We ensure quality and ethical and responsible individuals who meet these expectations of professionalism to when we ask that they are in front of and working with our students. We align with the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and the Certification Clearinghouse. That's House Bill 486. We also utilize the RAP Back program. We require online volunteer and contractor training for any of our parent community or community at large who wish to come into our schools and are very welcome to come into our schools and work with our students and help us. If you go to the next slide, which is the collaboration, we continue to have a strong collaboration with our external partners, our child welfare services, our police partners within Montgomery County Montgomery County Police Department, as well as our state's attorney's office. We work very closely with these external groups, as well as others. We meet on a monthly basis, the third Thursday of every month. We discuss our caseload, making sure that we are all on the same page. We continue to have the online reporting process where each of these 4 offices, student welfare and compliance, as well as the 3 externals, receive every child abuse and neglect form. And again, working with the Department of Compliance and Investigation to make sure that we are closing the loop, so to speak, on every one of these situations. And we continue the Emergency Communication Center, which was a direct line that was established about a little more than a year ago between MCPD, Montgomery County Police Department, and Montgomery County Public Schools. Next slide. You can see the total number of
Parents and
Oh, I'm
guardians.
sorry, I was looking one slide in front of me. So this was the number of volunteers who have completed the training over the past 5 years, going, I guess, from right to left, with FY21 being the COVID year, and we bounced back with 16,000 in FY22, and then jumped up 2 years ago, and then last year we were down just a little bit. But our volunteer program is very strong within our schools, and again, like I said before, very welcomed addition and part of our educational programming for our students.
So volunteers have to do that annually?
Yes, no, every 3 years.
Okay.
And we have a database running. We work with Shella Cherry's office within student leadership to make sure that all of our volunteers are in compliance.
Okay.
These are the number, I'm sorry, one back one. Oh, yeah, you're right where you need to be. These are the number of reports that came in on child abuse and neglect through MCPS, down a couple, 2,000 from the year before. And again, as I mentioned, this is about 20% of what the county of Montgomery receives through child welfare services, about 20 to 25%. So they annually receive about 12,000 reports of child abuse and neglect. So we work very closely with them. We also meet on an annual basis with child welfare services and discuss data and discuss the best resources and the best supportive measures possible to make sure that all of our students, whether or not these cases are substantiated, have the supports that they need moving forward. And you can see from that last slide too, and I mentioned this because it's been extremely beneficial, that we still have the paper reports available, and they do have to mail them or send them into the different of the 4 agencies, but significant amount of our reports come in through our online system. Next slide, sorry. I'll turn it over to my colleague, James Kutos, who will share a little bit about the employee numbers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edmondson. Serving as the acting director in the Department of Compliance and Investigation, and thankful for the opportunity to share with you today the data that we have on CPS reports involving MCPS employees, contractors, and volunteers. And this year's numbers do include a 4th category. We broke out employees for permanent employees as well as substitutes. And you see the various outcomes as decided by Child Protective Services there. Screened out means there was insufficient evidence that abuse or neglect occurred. Ruled out means a finding that abuse or neglect did not occur. Unsubstantiated, a finding that there is insufficient evidence to support a finding of indicated or ruled out. And then indicated is a finding that there is credible evidence that has not been satisfactorily refuted that abuse or neglect occurred. So those are the pieces of data that we wanted to share in terms of the CPS dispositions. If we go to the next slide. You'll see actions taken by MCPS based on the internal follow-up to those investigations. And we have a total of approximately 188 employees, 33 substitutes, 3 volunteers, and 2 contractors that we had to go through various decision levels. You see those decision levels on the screen. I will say that we've made, since October 14th to now, an additional 10% decrease in the number of pending listed in that column. So we have actually increased slightly the number of individuals who were removed from employment or received a reprimand or other disciplinary letter. If we could move on to the next slide, please.
Just out of curiosity.
Oh, sure.
Removal from employment, suspension without pay. We also have employees sometimes that are suspended with pay, is that correct?
So it's rare that there's a suspension with pay.
Okay.
Almost always that particular decision involves some level of period of time without pay.
Okay.
And then moving on to the next slide, you see the considerations as we move into FY25. I did want to highlight a few key ones there. The collaboration that Mr. Edmondson mentioned earlier, we do meet monthly with that multidisciplinary team, and it is an extremely important part of our work so that we can bring to resolution external agency investigations so that Department of Compliance and Investigation may begin their investigations. And although we meet monthly, we don't wait until those monthly meetings to continue the communication. If cases are closed out by those external agencies in between those meetings, we can move forward with our work as quickly as possible. Also wanted to highlight the fact that we're implementing a year-long engagement plan with students on expectations, including the new culture of respect. That's been expanded to 4 different quarters of the year, and that outreach will be occurring with the students across 4 quarters of this school year. And then the last piece I wanted to highlight was the launch of the district-wide campaign on anti-hate bias and bullying and harassment. Posters and other campaign materials have been shared at all schools. All of them have them and hopefully are posting them proudly throughout the school so that students know and understand, as well as staff, our approach to ensuring that there's great awareness and that we're able to reduce instances across the year. So I'll pause there to turn it back to you for questions and discussion.
I'll look to my colleagues and see if they have any comments or questions. No? No, and I already asked mine as we were going along. So I know that this is an annual report, but I do very much appreciate the time that you take to share the information with us and our colleagues, and to have a great appreciation for the additional work that we've done over the last several years in trying to make sure that these instances are investigated appropriately and handled appropriately. So thank you to you all and your staff and everything, and I appreciate the presentation. All right. Well, moving on. Next up, I'm going to ask staff to begin the review of draft language for our new policy GCB, investigation of allegations of employee misconduct. With that, I will turn it over to you all.
Thank you, Mrs. Mondrowski. Good afternoon. Today we are providing for your review a new policy recommended by the Montgomery County Office of the Inspector General. And so today we have James remaining with us on the table. And one thing we'd like to point out is that this new policy establishes the core principles of guiding MCPS investigations, the board's expectations for employee conduct, and the purpose and approach MCPS shall take when investigating employee misconduct. Turn it over to Mr. Kustos.
Thank you so much. If I can take you to page 1 of the draft, you'll see that the purpose of the policy is to establish guiding principles for MCPS's approach to conduct and misconduct. And first is the clear statement of expectations for employee conduct that they adhere to published rules. Second is the board's commitment to non-discrimination and equity in MCPS's application of these rules, including non-discrimination and equity in the conduct of investigations. What follows are the criteria for excellence and professionalism in investigation, starting with a clear statement of what an investigation will and will not do. So to be clear, an investigation is fact-finding. It is not a determination of misconduct. That role belongs to a decision maker who is not the investigator. The definition provides structure for the rest of the document. The objectivity and professionalism of investigators should never be in question. And to this end, you will see an expectation that investigators are to be qualified, impartial, unbiased, and free of any conflict of interest. The use of thorough in this draft policy is quite intentional and requires investigators not just to establish key facts, but to push for gaps in evidence and resolution of omissions and inconsistencies. When we push to identify gaps and inconsistencies, it requires professional expertise in a wide array of skills. The list of professional qualifications starts on line 64, requiring that the investigation unit as a whole possesses background in employment law, school administration, investigation, Maryland certification requirements, and performance evaluation, among other skill sets. That's why we deliberately wrote the policy to emphasize that the investigations unit as a whole will possess these areas of expertise, not necessarily that one individual has all of those skills. And engage in ongoing professional development to continually expand these skills. First, it's important to state that MCPS didn't wait for this policy to act upon the requirements and recommendations of the Office of the Inspector General. In fact, we've been very busy with that work since Ms. Boone and I came on board at the end of April. And we've made some great progress in the area of a case management system with Guardian, with the finalization of an already established internal manual for employee misconduct investigations that we updated and adapted to present day. And we collaborated with the Office of Inspector Generals to share that information with them and to get their feedback on the progress that we made in all of those areas, meeting with their representatives on a number of occasions. We also engaged with external and internal stakeholders to get feedback from them on what we're doing in our investigative processes, where we are perhaps falling short, and how we could continuously improve. Among the priorities we received from the board and the OIG was a case management process, which you'll see detailed starting at line 44. A confidential public hotline managed externally, case tracking of of self-identified and anonymous reports, investigation of all complaints, and the investigation of anonymous complaints with the same procedures and thoroughness based on all relevant information available. What you see in the policy language is the next step. The board making it clear that these shall all be built out into implementing procedures, and in a manner that allows these procedures to be readily adapted for improvements in techniques and shifting legal compliance obligations. With that, I'll pause at this point for your comments and discussion.
I will reach out to my colleagues, but I do want to say I think this is very good. I appreciate all the thought and detail that's been put into it. Ms. Evans?
Yeah, so my comments were similar. This is really important that we have this type of policy in place, and I like the thoroughness and the level of detail that has gone into the policy, and in particular on on page 2 from line 62 to 68. I do think it was important for you to call out what the entire office should encompass in terms of expertise, because I do see, while it is important to have that legal background, I do see the value added that you add, Mr. Kuzkos, in this process to have a background in education. So I know that as we've been talking about putting this policy in place, and some of the course corrections that we did want to make in that office in terms of professionalism, I'll just speak for myself. Sometimes words matter. So how it was communicated could have been perceived as a negative as having had principals in those positions, but there was absolutely a benefit to having someone with an education background in the office. And so while we don't know what people's second careers or how many careers they've had, right? Because you have a background that I don't think everybody is aware of that's separate from education. But I do appreciate the work that has gone into this, and that everyone in the system thought it important to make adjustments, make changes, and fill in gaps and holes where they existed. So I don't want people to think that nothing has been happening, because there have been a lot of things that have been happening. And so I do appreciate all the people that have come before us today and all the people that do the work in support of the policies here in the school system. And as this being my last meeting, I did want to state that publicly, that I do appreciate all the hard work and effort that goes into creating new policies, revising policies, and just taking the feedback and the consideration of not only the community, but of the board members. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wolf?
I just want to echo the comments of my colleagues and thank you for all the hard work that has gone into this. I'm really pleased with the outcome, but I think you've said something that is very important, and that is that we didn't wait to be told what needed to be done. People somehow think that things have not been happening, but this is an outgrowth of knowing and identifying where there was a problem and what changes needed to be made. So I just want to thank you for that.
And Bernil, you have something as well?
Yeah, I'll echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I think this is just incredibly well done.
Yeah, and again, I'm just going to say thank you very much. It's all been said, but I know it hasn't been an easy task to come in and try and readjust things that needed adjusting. So we are all very, very grateful, not just as a committee, but as a full board for the work that all of you have done in trying to make sure that we're doing the right things for our staff, our students, and our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so if
Can we
there's
move that
no,
forward?
What's that?
we
Yeah, if there's no further questions or anything, comments, I do need a motion to forward the draft language for new policy GCB to the full Board of Education for tentative action.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? And that's unanimous. Great, thank you very much. So we will send this to the full board. Okay. Did you, okay, so let's see, now where we're going. Next up, I'm going to ask staff to begin the review of the draft amendments to policy GAA, positive work environment in a self-renewing organization. And I will turn it over to staff.
Okay. My name is Sally Davis. I'm the supervisor of policy and regulations.
Leslie Turner Percival, Legal Director in the Office of General Counsel.
And we have one more.
Darlene Harris, Executive Director of the Office of Human Resources and Development.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'm going to kick us off. So our assignment from the Board Policy Management Committee was to re-envision policy GAA. So we're here today to ask for your feedback on the first draft and approval to move it forward to the full board for tentative action and distribution for public comments. So I'd like to highlight the discussions and priorities the writing group identified in developing this updated draft. First off, the title of the original GAA was a mouthful, and our read on the 2005 policy that it was a bit diffuse in its objectives, and but was essentially about the professional growth system. So we wanted to focus with clearer priorities and more robust professional growth processes for MCPS employees. And based on our review of GAA, we want to keep the original commitment to professional growth, but we want to build out what it should look like. So the board's stated core purpose is that we are to prepare all students to thrive. We think policy GAA should recognize that all MCPS employees are essential to making this happen. whether they are directly engaged with students in the classroom, other school spaces, or among the many employees whose contributions are more indirect, keeping the schools running and running well, supporting our families, keeping us in compliance with various requirements, and keeping the resources flowing to support our work. So our first objective for GAA was to emphasize workforce excellence as requisite to student success, and that involves all of us. We also want GAA to see the life cycle of an employee as continuous, from recruiting and onboarding, keeping employees' skills sharp, to looking ahead to the many ways that employees can move into greater areas of responsibility and leadership, and when needed, to support employees who are struggling and to intervene effectively when that performance improvement is needed. And now I'm going to turn to Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. All right, so as you see, topic 1 is the core purpose, and we prepare all students to thrive in their future. And we know that MCPS is a student-centered organization, but sometimes we struggle with consistently recognizing and supporting how all employees contribute to this mission. Next slide. So topic 2 was the 3 connected ideas. We know that professional growth system, as Ms. Davis said, is experienced differently across our employees. So for some employees, we recognize that the professional growth system only means something has gone wrong. Performance is not meeting expectation. While this is one of the functions of professional growth, it is only one. And if the other 2 are working, an employee need never experience it. So, a truly systemic approach to professional growth is much more than that. It is as much about onboarding and skill development for an employee's current position as it is for encouraging employees to think ahead to where their careers in MCPS can take them. So, a truly resilient organization draws out and retains talent, nurtures employees to respond imaginatively to unfamiliar or challenging situations, to persevere and to collaborate. So when we talk about, quote, growing our own, we return on the investment we make in our employees many times over. Next slide, please. So we did have a writing group, to put these issues before focus groups because we wanted to hear what they had to say. And as you see on the screen, what kept on coming up. Supportive, anti-racist, collaborative, responsive. So our professional growth system should live out our core values of being anti-racist, supportive, responsive, collaborative. But what does that really mean? And so we pushed the discussion to ask, what makes a professional growth system anti-racist, supportive, responsive, and collaborative? And this is where we think we've improved this draft over the previous version. If we really want to see these values lived out in our workplaces, we need to articulate guiding principles and strategies for a professional growth system that gets us there. Next slide, please. So it's really the why and how. We know that an employee's immediate supervisor has a bigger day-to-day role in getting the best from every employee every day, for cultivating work environments that inspire us all towards excellence. And so the implementation strategy focuses on routine support, learning-focused supervision, and comprehensive professional learning to raise awareness of identifiable patterns of implicit bias in evaluation processes and disrupt such conduct within MCPS. But we also know that individual professional learning plans for licensed employees are more routine than it is for other employees and is even required in state regulations. But employees in all spheres of Montgomery County Public Schools need to be encouraged to develop professional interests, develop new competencies, and seek leadership opportunities. This isn't just how we build a resilient organization, it's about how we live our commitment to equity. Next slide, please. So, in short, here's what you'll see in the revised draft. a new title, shorter of course, that we think captures what we want from MCPS.
So much better.
I know, right? A clear emphasis on students at the center of our work, a clear articulation of values we expect all employees to experience in our professional growth system, a professional growth structure with 3 connected spheres. The first being onboarding, training, and keeping our employee skills sharp for the jobs they have now. Career advancement to draw out professional interest and leadership potential and retain talent. And last, yes, we should need it, a structure that fairly and effectively responds when employees' performance falls short. The new draft has a clear statement that supervisors are forefront in employees' daily work lives, where employees and supervisors alike share responsibility for the workforce excellence. I'll turn it back over to Sally.
Thanks, Darlene. So we have 2 recommendations today. We'd like to revise and retitle GAA to emphasize workforce excellence and organizational resilience. And we're asking you to approve the draft to move it to the full board for tentative action and permission to distribute for public comment. Okay. And I'm happy to go through the draft if you'd like, but I would also pause for your discussion.
I just, I think that this is amazing by comparison to, what we've had. So, and I really appreciated everything that you said. I do hope that the community will have access to these slides, and to some extent, some of your comments, because I think it's really important that we remember that if we expect high, if we want high expectations for all, we need to articulate how we expect that to play out and what everyone's role in that is. So I'm very pleased with it. I don't know if my colleagues have anything any questions or anything. No? Okay. Nope. Well, then that's great. So those are your 2 recommendations. Would someone like to move approval of the draft for the full board consideration to go to public comment?
Move approval.
Do we need a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, well, we're moving along. Let's see where we're at now. Okay, next I'm going to ask staff to begin the review of the technical amendments for policy BLB, Rules of Procedure in Appeals and Hearings.
All right, so there were 3 issues the committee gave us to look at, with initially the request that these be handled as technical amendments. So the 3 issues were these. The first was to comply with the Maryland State Board of Education page limits that are stated in COMAR. So uses of the word concise throughout the document have been clarified to align with COMAR, requiring that appeal documentation be no longer than 15 pages, excluding attachments. So you'll notice that edit on page 4 at line 136. And let's see, I believe there's another.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I have 2, in my materials, I had 2 versions, if you will. One reads draft 1, and the other one reads technical amendments updated.
Updated.
Okay. I was going to say, I wasn't sure which I was supposed to be.
Updated, right.
Okay, so page 4?
Page 4, line 136. So that is the state's language, no longer than 15 pages excluding attachments, and that appears again on page 10, but same context. What does concise mean? Concise means 15 pages. Okay. The second technical edit the committee request was to eliminate confusion about seemingly redundant terms like issue and fact, as they are used in BLB. So continuing on page 4, you'll notice that the following language is offered, which clarifies that issue is really, fact is one part of an issue. An issue is the rule the appellant contends has been violated, the facts the appellant thinks are relevant, and especially any facts that the superintendent, set forth by the superintendent, that are disputed by the appellant, and then finally the remedy. So the issue is kind of a package, but we thought maybe just the use of issue, fact, yada, yada was too confusing. So there's a lot there, but it's just a rewrite to try to make it clearer. All right, so lines 150 to 160 below are not new, but have just been relocated so that it's cleaner that when the appellant is requesting oral argument or an evidentiary hearing, that request should be included in the statement. And then lines 159 to 162 on the following pages are similarly not new, but relocated from below. And then the third update the committee requested was to clarify language so the intent of using school days and calendar days in one section was working as an intended. And you'll recall that the issue the last rewrite created was difficulty in processing COSA appeals during the summer months. So we hope we've made it better. Page 5 has been revised to say that if the superintendent's response to the board requires the participation of a school office during winter and spring break when school offices are closed, those days are not counted in the time. However, the clarification is that summer break, the students are off school, but the school offices are open. So school offices are still open and expected to respond with an expected timeline. So this assists the superintendent and the board to respond in a more timely manner to appeals for changes of school assignments that are typically trying to be processed during the summer. So that concludes our run through.
Okay, great, I really appreciate that. I have a couple of comments that I'd like to make. I have to be honest, I found this very confusing to follow in terms of, I'll just give you an example, or one example. If you look at line 158 on the very top of page 5, it says, period set forth in section 3BE. Can you show me where that is?
Okay, the E is stricken, so it should read.
Not on my copy, but that's okay.
I think it just doesn't look stricken.
Yeah, the E looks like the cross of the
over
E.
Oh,
Sorry, it's not
okay.
a very effective.
Okay.
Okay, so we're just going to back up to the bottom of, to the middle of page 4, and I do agree with you, but we'll see if we can make it better. So
Bless you.
the section 3B is line 126, section 3C is line 133. So what it's saying is that the appellant has 30 days. Appeal is not required. All right, so the appellant has 30 days to give you notice that they intend to appeal, and then another 10 to process their statement, right? So if the appellant fails to meet those timelines, such failure shall constitute sufficient grounds for the board or the board's designee to dismiss the appeal.
Okay. One more example question. Down a little bit on page 5, it reads allowed under B.3. I don't see that either.
Can you tell me what line? Do you see it?
So like on line 182-ish, somewhere down there, it reads, in the time allowed under I, the first I, it reads allowed under B.3, and I don't know what that means. Or I couldn't figure out how to find that.
Line 164. Is that where we are?
So it starts with 117, so appeals under. So this is referencing appeals under section 4-205C. So that starts with section 3 on line 117. So B is the sub.
Got
section.
Okay. All right, so it would be like line 126 essentially is where that's suggesting I would be going to look.
So yes, it's referencing B3.1.
Okay. So I don't need to go through all of them. I just would like to request that you all kind of go through and see if there might be an easier way of numbering and
referencing.
alphabeting these
Yes.
things. I did have one other question on line 43. Why is that not number 3? Or why does that not have a number, I guess I should say? Because the other ones all have numbers.
I believe it should.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because that was confusing me about some of the reference points as well. The only other main thing that I had, so basically, just if you guys could go through and just really make sure that if somebody is trying to, I mean, you know how these things go. We hear from parents all the time, it's so complicated to do this, and we just don't want to make the policy make it any harder than it already feels like it sometimes is. One other thing that came up in conversation with the board for during appeals was the specific language about appeals being filed late or past a timeline, and only unless there was a bona fide emergency or you just move into the county, that would be waived, that the deadline would be waived. And as a board, we had discussed that we feel it really should be a little bit broader than that. Like if you move, you don't have to be new to the county, but if you move in the county in the middle of the school year and you want your child to be able to stay and you have to file a COSA, I wouldn't want somebody to be told, nope, you didn't move from somewhere else, so you can't apply. And trying to minimize the reasons why the board would have to reverse something that the department makes a decision on, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, understood.
Okay.
We'll address that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. I think that was pretty much everything else that I had. Do any of my colleagues have any questions, concerns, or anything like that? No? Okay. Oh, yes, Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, like when we're talking about, some of this language being hard to follow and, this is one of our most public-facing documents in terms of one of the ones that our community engages with the most. Let's think about like we like to reference it often, but what is the end user experience if they're kind of going through this policy? And I understand policy is designed to, get the loopholes out and make sure that you have a clear and consistent process. But let's just make sure that, whenever we're referencing back to anything, it's very clear what we're referencing back to, how to get to those points. And I think that is just my sort of general suggestion.
Yes, I concur with that. Which, actually leads me the question of, because of technical amendments, it does have to go to the full board for approval, but it does not go out to the general public. But I would like to encourage you to try and get some non-professional opinions maybe on how some of this reads, just in terms of the clarity aspect of it. So if there's nothing else, then I will ask that we get a motion to forward the final draft of technical amendments to policy BLB to the full Board of Education for final approval.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Absolutely.
Like you, I found it a little bit difficult to follow. Is there any way that there's an opportunity for it to come back to committee before it goes to the full board for review?
Yes, of course. If they make adjustments, and even if we wanted to put it out for public comment for a little while, we could, correct? So then it would go through that, and then it would come back to the policy committee before going to the full board, which I would actually be very supportive of.
All right, thank you.
So would that be the same motion?
No, it would be a different motion. I would have to ask for a motion to send this back to the Office of General Counsel and to make clarifications and put out for public comment for a brief time, or is that not?
So I think procedurally what we would look to do, if the desire is to have the Office of General Counsel make recommendations that might go beyond the technical in terms of what you were referencing, Mrs. Smondrowski, for the piece about untimeliness, for example. That the motion would be that it goes back to the Office of General Counsel for review, and then it would come back to the committee.
Okay.
Before going to the full board for tentative action then at that time.
Okay, yes. Well, I would like to move that.
I'll say so moved to the motion.
Do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your work on that. I mean, it's a lot, but so thank you. Okay. I think that brings us to our final discussion, which I know everyone's very excited about, and that is the discussion of the school year calendar for the 2025-2026 school year. This has been brought to the full board and is back again, and so I will turn it over to Ms. Edwards if you want to kick it off with the school calendar.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair Smondrowski, and to the other members of the PMC committee. We are here to discuss the school year calendar. Just wanted to narrow us in terms of where we are in the timeline. We are at our second stop with the Policy Management Committee. We will be coming to the December 5th board meeting with the superintendent's recommendation for the calendar that does include robust feedback that we've heard from stakeholders pretty much from last year to deliver a calendar that we see best fit for this particular year. We'll share some information with you that we've gathered from Survey 2, from student, staff, and the community, our committees, as well as other smaller focus groups as we've moved along the way. One of the things that we heard from the board the last time was to make sure that we gathered some feedback, continue to gather feedback around our Student Transition Day, which is a new addition to our school year calendar, which provides an opportunity on the first day of school as a non-instructional day for our kindergarten students, our sixth grade students, and our ninth grade students at those key transitional times during their career. We do have some 3 to 5 schools, so we do want to incorporate those third graders who are going into 3 to 5 schools. One change that we do want to make at our October board meeting, we highlighted that it would also include special education and our EML students. When we talk about those equity questions of who does this advantage and who does this disadvantage, some of the feedback that we heard, especially from our principals and our staff in schools with high populations of EML and or large special education programs, they felt a certain kind of way of buses going down the street and there being students going to their schools and they be full of EML students. They did not want the feeling that all the EML students are going to school because we broadcast it as a district. So we were very thoughtful around that, and the principal said, can we have the flexibility if we wanted to invite certain populations? And we said, absolutely. We did not want to put a marker around any child, any family to do the negative of what we're trying to do with the transition day. The big thing that we do need to do is, of course, build it out and be able to communicate it and give people an understanding of what it is. Just wanted to share with you some feedback from our survey results. We called it round 2. We focused on 3 things: Student Transition Day. I shared with you the feedback that we heard. We still have to clarify some things, and I think that will come with the build out. We will have a committee of internal and external members to help us to really be able to do that. And then we continue to get feedback around an 8-day and a 10-day winter break. Wanted to show these pie charts because there's a lot of energy, of course, around the 10-day winter break. Who wouldn't want to do that? However, with the 10-day winter break,
it does put the last day of school on June 22nd, and that is not wildly popular. So the recommendation that we're bringing forward today to PMC, we're going to show you one calendar, which is the 8-day winter break, taking into account that though people like the longer winter break, they also don't want to get out of school late as well. So that's the concession that we have. So you see in the 8-day winter break calendar, and we'll stop calling it that after today, just some key dates that are in there. We talked about that Monday, typically the first week that we know it as for pre-service, the 25th of August being that student transition day, but the actual first day of school would be Tuesday. So that does give a 4-day week. This calendar does have 181 instructional days. There is no reduction in days of work days for our staff within this calendar. The winter break is from the 24th through the 2nd, and then the spring break is the 30th through the 6th, with the last day of school being June 17th within this calendar. In addition, I do want to remind PMC that when we do the adoption of the regular school year calendar, we also do Arcola. I was going to say Arcola next. Please forgive me. It just rolls off my tongue, but Arcola Elementary School. And you can see their calendar in terms of mirroring certain days. They are having a student transition day as well. It matches the time frame for when they go to school, which I think is really important. And so again, working with their staff and community to be able to receive feedback and making sure that people feel included and their voices are heard. But you can see that they will begin school. Our recommendation for next year is July 8th for them with their winter and spring break aligning. And then their last day, of course, is different. It's June 17th. Okay. So we did, as we shared at the last board meeting, we started to look at 26, 27. We are not bringing a draft forward for you to look at. There are some complexities there, and we really need some time to really build out some models and work with community to be able to hear their input, to be able to develop some strong recommendations for the 26, 27 calendar. And so we turn it over to the committee for discussion.
Ms. Wolf?
Thank you for this. I just have one question. that I still like the idea of a transition day, but I'm surprised. I wanted to hear what feedback we got on that.
Yes, I was going to ask you that,
because
too.
I'm a little bit concerned that, you know, families, they have some kids that wouldn't be starting, some that would be, and it might get to be confusing and difficult for them to deal with.
Especially if it's the older child that does have it and youngers that don't.
We did hear that as a piece of feedback. We talked to other districts who've been doing it for a while. We've had some schools that have done their own version of it. Some locations let any student come. You know, if there's a sibling connection there and they're in the same school, they do let them come. And then some, we found that people just, they work with their children just like if it were a professional day and students are out of school. So we did hear that. I think any day that we have off within our calendar, professional day, winter break, we often hear, you know, the child care component as an issue.
I guess what I'm also concerned about, although I know that the teachers are already back in school, is how that works for them.
Yeah.
You know?
I asked about that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, are all teachers working, and are they all working the same amount? Or it just seems complex, although I do know that, as I had mentioned before, I guess they've already been doing this to some extent. It's just been on the Friday before school starts.
It's been on the Thursday, yeah, the week before. The difference for that week before was that it was not a district-wide initiative.
Oh.
It was mainly at the secondary schools. Not all secondary schools participated. And in our elementary schools, they had varied programs that they offered mainly to kindergarten students.
Okay. And just to clarify, we thought that doing it the Friday, let's say, before, as opposed to the Monday, was not as effective?
The week before posed a couple of different pieces. We still had families that were on vacation. So then that created an opportunity for access. We also, again, did not have every location that participated. So depending on where you were, what the school did or didn't do, it then created some variance, in terms of experience. And so we wanted to be able to level the playing field with experience, but also create an opportunity that this is our district-wide initiative. And in the past, I want to say, maybe not last year, but the 2 years prior to that, some of the feedback that we heard about our calendar was the possibility of a 4-day week going back, during that first week of school, for the entire student body. So not to say that that came up this time, but we've heard that in the past from feedback. And we see other school districts that have done that as well.
Interesting. Okay. Well, unless anyone has anything else.
And Ms. Wolf, we'll bring back some of the feedback. We'll get some
would be
specific areas about which.
I'd also like to see if we could get some feedback after this has happened. If this gets approved by the full board, if we can get feedback from our families that participated or didn't participate and why. Okay, thank you.
We'll build it into our planning.
Okay, great. Okay, anybody else have any questions or concerns or comments?
I just want to say on the students' behalf, thank you for the 10-day winter break. Although I won't be here to witness it, I know.
No, they're not doing that. It's 8. They're going with 8.
But you can still thank us.
Never mind.
Sorry, I guess I misheard when we were looking at there. I think, when we think about what. We saw the 75% in terms of the student graph, and I guess that was what clicked in my mind. And I can understand that the later end date is a reason for one of the for not having that 10-day winter break. But in my mind, when there's an overwhelming amount of support behind that 10-day initiative, I also am concerned with what will the actual learning environment of our schools look like during that time period. Again,
The first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Speaking as a student, I would be, I don't know if I would be the most engaged during that period of time, and I think a lot of students would say the same thing along those same lines. So, I do still have concerns along that line. But I'll let it go to the board for more discussion and give the public a chance to have some more comment on it. But I think that will be, again, the general consensus from the public and from students especially along the lines of, what will the learning environment look on those 2 days? And why is, if this was the majority opinion, why is this the option that's being moved forward to the table?
I would also just like to ask that, to Ms. Wolf's point, and actually some of what we were also just talking about with the surveying aspect of it, if when you bring it to the full board, you could break down a little of these, like how many voices were parents, how many were students, how many were staff. I think that's always really helpful to be able to get a better sense of.
Absolutely. We can include that as well as some of the direct quotes from the focus groups, I think would be helpful for the board to be able to see that. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
For the board to be able to see that. And Mr. Savannah, you bring up a good point in terms of what the data actually tells us and kind of, the recommendation to make in terms of the considerations around operational need and just the other considerations that we have to take into account for the calendar.
Drink your water, ma'am.
What is it? Go ahead.
Yeah, and again, when we go back to this idea of being not just a data focused school system, but a data driven school system, this recommendation does concern me a little bit in that sort of regard, because we are and I do get the numbers are pretty evenly matched, 76-24, 76-24 both ways, but I think were they presented in, and this is a question about the data collection as well, were they presented in the idea of which could you either have, like if you have to choose one, or if you have, like, which would you
Right.
rather have? Because I think if I put two stories up on my Instagram right now and I said, which could you rather have, school end on Wednesday, June 17th, and or Monday, June 22nd, or have a 10-day winter break, right, with the alternate being 8 days, and then you have school end on the 17th. I think that would be the data that you're looking to get, and that's not the data that's reflected within the stuff that you have collected already. And so that's a concern about the data collection method, because the assumptions that are being made off the data here are not necessarily ones that can be drawn from the way that it was collected.
If I could just respond, I want you to just think about something. As a grandparent that has a child that goes to a summer program, that Monday doesn't work for me because I got to pay for that Monday to put him in a summer program for that week. So I would prefer that school end on a Friday or Thursday the week before, because if he has to go to school that Monday, I'm losing the money for that Monday because the camp doesn't figure out 4 days. It's just something for you to think about, you know.
No, and I appreciate that perspective, but I think, again, like, that's the idea of having the data collected in not just in isolation that we need, right? So I would be willing to accept whatever the outcome of the data is if the data is collected not in isolation and is collected in tandem with whatever the other alternative is, right? Because if you put it up to parents and you say, hey, this is the option between an 8-day and an 8-day winter break and school will end on this day versus a 10-day winter break and school will end on this day, then now you have, like, the data to make the decision versus just saying this amount of people want this, this amount of people want this.
I agree with you. And so what I wanted to do is just share the way that we crafted the second survey was to include the full calendars for both calendars so that people could understand when we asked them questions about, you know, which winter break do you prefer, which end of school year, we also gave them an opportunity to comment beyond just, you know, sort of making those choices. And the overwhelming comments that we got that were attached to the survey really reflected what Ms. Wolf said about that Monday being a big barrier for families in terms of camp, also a barrier in terms of people getting summer employment for many of our 10-month employees. And the other piece of it that we've heard overwhelmingly from our SEIU employees is the impact of the 10-day winter break on their pay periods. It would give them 2 5-day pay periods right at the holidays. And that is a tremendous impact. And it's challenging for us in district operations because we have the largest number of SEIU employees, you know, in terms of staff. And so, you know, the policy talks about balancing instructional and operational needs. And I think we'd all love to have long breaks, and that would include summer as well. But I will tell you that the overwhelming amount of qualitative feedback that we've gotten, and I read all the comments and then I color code them so I can see where the energy is.
Nice.
And people are very outspoken about ending school, you know, sort of earlier than that 22nd. A lot of people felt like it seemed very late in the year for them. And so that created a challenge for us in terms of thinking about what we wanted to bring forward as we think about policy.
So I'm gonna bring it back to second to the other point around our transition days again, right? So if, for example, our transition days has been what it was in the past, where we have a Thursday sort of setup for that, and that Monday was considered a full school day, then no longer would we be having the final Monday of the school year be, the final day of the school year be on a Monday, because that would still be the same amount of time, and that would end on that Friday. So that's one of the concerns. I understand the concerns with the SEIU employees, and I do want to be balanced with the way that we, you know, look at our data and really enforce the policy the way it is written. But I think and then the second part of this is also with reference to having to have families go back and look at the calendar side by side to understand which is which. I think that puts the burden of investigation on the families to try and figure out, what does each mean for each of these calendars, and not say that, you can only have this or this. And that's the issue for me, is that's an accessibility issue, is you have to go back and look at both the calendars and go through and comb through each one to see, an 8-day winter break means school ends on this day. A 10-day winter break means school ends on this day. What does this mean for my family? And then that's the issue that I have.
And we'll share the surveys that we put out. We've worked hard over the past year to make them more accessible, easier for people to kind of identify. We really slimmed it down, but we're happy to share them with you and to think about what future opportunities look like, especially as we come up to this transition day, is what I'll say. The 2 calendars came from, those were our 2 options that we put forward, and really trying to make it something that people could do on their phone, they could do quickly, but we also did the focus groups primarily because we knew everyone would not participate. But as we continue to move forward in whatever process that we do, happy to engage with you, but we would like to share to kind of, hear a little bit more as we think about future data collection.
Sevens?
Yep. Yeah, I was thinking about what I was going to say. So I always appreciate the engagement in the conversation and the discussion. I think for me, if it wasn't so even in terms of the pie charts, that what you're saying would make more sense, right? But I think in this instance, as a former parent of a student in the school system, why I do value my students' voice, and I always include their voice in everything, and we do as well. I think that as a parent, community member, I think they're gonna take the avenue of what, in this situation, what a good bit of the adults are saying versus what the students are saying, for a variety of reasons that I heard. I know for me in the very beginning, while 10 days does sound very attractive and people do want the break, I think I was hyper-focused about what we heard from SEIU, in particular during our annual meeting, because what they do always stress and say every year is that in the very beginning part of the year, it gets to be difficult where there's not a month where they don't get their pay cut, and then coming into the winter break, they are particular. And I remember, I'm not gonna say her name out loud, but I remember one thing that one SEIU member said was, as I'm thinking about planning for gifts and what purchases that I want to be able to make, my paycheck being short impacts what I'm able to do for the holidays, for my family, in terms of gifts, in terms of food. So I do want to be conscious about the people in our school system that provide a lot of support. It may not be in the classroom front facing. I think in this instance, while I do want our students to think about their well-being and everything, I think in this case, we probably have to weigh some of the pros and the cons. What I liked about the transition day is that it was on the Monday, and when we were talking about students being connected and engaged, that full day allowed students to be in the school with not, without a lot of people, without a lot of fear or anxiety, to really take a moment to think about how they could be engaged in their education, in their school. And I think that will bode well for the system to try to build school spirit very early on. As a parent, thinking about the previous week where you had a half day for your student to engage in a new facility, new building, that transition period for some of our students, it just wasn't enough time. So I do hope that there isn't an unintended consequence as a result of having school for a full day for a specified number of students. I like that we could possibly, I thought I heard, offer some flexibility to some of our students if parents are in fact in a bind. I do think it would behoove us, if that is going to be what we do, to really communicate that in a way so families could understand that. But I appreciate you all breaking down some of what the comments were. I think that was important to say out loud. And so, Mr. Subarno, I always appreciate your comments, your thoughts, and your feedback. And I just wanted to kind of, maybe for the last time, step in and just share my thoughts. Like, I hear you, and I do respect what you're saying. So the hard part about our job is we're not always going to satisfy everybody, but I do think it's important for us to try to find that balance. And guess what? To your point, because you are absolutely right, some people are probably not going to come to school. They're probably going to make vacation plans. And so we just need to ensure, my hope is that if we do go with the 8 days and not the 10 days, that we really do communicate to our principals and teachers in the classrooms to not give like really big assignments. If I could say it. You know, it's almost like on those holidays. You could let them know the week before that you're going to assign whatever, and it's going to be due when they come back. But hopefully there aren't any tests in those 2 days. It's going to be right before.
Yeah,
Not as well.
So I'm
thinking the same
just
thing.
saying something to think about, though.
People
right?
won't show up for those 2 days. A lot of people, I think.
So I just wanted to offer that, and I'm definitely not shooting you down, but I just wanted to add another perspective and another thought, because as we're going, and I'll just say this too, this is policy, but as you all are about to enter into a really tough budget season, as much as we can do with the low-hanging fruit, to really think about what are some of the little things that we could give to staff, right, to make it just a little bit more bearable, because this is going to be different times, and our superintendent has stated that we should think about all those things, because they do matter, right? As we come back into a new year, having some really tough conversations, right? So want everybody to be well rested when they come back and be prepared and energized for the new year. But I don't think as we come into the new year, we want a good bit of our employees grappling with short pay, right? So in this instance, I'm thinking about SEIU, right? And then to the point that Ms. Wolf mentioned earlier, people have summer plans already in place. They do have the camp scheduled for their students. And that one day, that one day, if you break down the cost of camps, you just would like to get that back in your pocket, and you actually can't. Being someone that does not have to pay for summer camps anymore, I do empathize with people that have made decisions, because some of our families do have to make decisions a year in advance. They really have to plan out their schedules. So I just like for us to think of, a little bit more about this. But you all will make, you'll finalize it and make decisions December the 5th. But I do want us to keep that in mind too, right?
yeah.
Any final comments?
Yeah. This is my final thing. It does have a little bit before it comes back to the board. So my note would just be, let's try and get some community feedback around understanding this is a this or this, right? It's not and this, it's a or, right? To make that very clear within maybe some of our some of our surveys, that you can't have both an early end to the school and a 10-day winter break. That's not going to happen. I think that's very clear. And then just to think about what does our new HCM system mean for some of this pay and surrounding that, how can that alleviate any concerns there? Those are just some things to maybe keep in mind for the future. And I just do want to be very clear. I understand there are concerns bigger here than students getting 2 extra days of winter break. I'm very aware of that. I just want to be sure that within the data that we collect and the feedback that we're receiving, it's representative of all communities and their level of understanding of what this means in the different capacities in the different areas.
Including even, just my 2 cents, that if we did the introduction day on the Friday before school, then the Monday thing wouldn't be an issue because it could still end on the 17th, but just throwing that out there as well. So all things to keep in mind. So if nobody has any other comments or questions, I will need a motion to forward the draft of the 25-26 school year calendar as discussed to the full Board of Education for final action at its December 5th, 2024 meeting.
Move for approval.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? And that's unanimous. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you all for your time and all of the work that you've done on this. It's never easy, but we do appreciate it.
Thank
So,
you. And Mrs. Mondrowski and Mrs. Evans, thank you for your service.
Thank you. I was gonna say, very sad being our last, not just board meeting or committee meeting, but meeting, I have to say. So I was going to say a couple of words, but I'm afraid I will get very emotional. But let's do item number 8. It's an item of information, MCPS regulations approved since last committee meeting. Do any of the committee members have any questions or concerns regarding that? Nope. All right. In that case, I do want to say thank you so much to all of our staff and our community. It's been an incredible 12 years. And I will definitely miss everybody. And I have been very honored to be in the chair of this committee for the years that I've been able to do it. And a very, very appreciative. People don't know how much work goes in with staff behind the scenes all the time. And you know, the constant communication with the committee chairs. And it's just, you know, you grow very close to people after time together. So I do really want to just say thank you very much. It's been a true honor, pleasure, and a joy in my life. So you all have a great afternoon, and that concludes the Policy Management Committee meeting. Unless I need a motion to adjourn? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn? No one? No one wants to go?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.